Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the fifth class of the JavaScript Simplified course. Yesterday, which happens to be the fourth class of JavaScript Simplified course, we treated function, just an introduction to function, meaning of function, three types of function, three basic types of function that we have function expression, function declaration, and arrow function. We also addressed named function and anonymous function. So, and we talked about that. We said function declaration can also be called named function, and I also said that anonymous function are function that are without name. And one example of an anonymous function is function expression and arrow function. All right. So, and I said that JavaScript function can be assigned to a variable and also can be assigned to the property of an object. All right. We also looked at JavaScript. We actually look at function with parameter, single parameter, multiple parameter. We also looked at default parameter as well. So this was we also looked at return too as well, but not in details. I said we are going to look at it in details in today's class. So that was where we stopped in our last class. So today we are going to look at return statement in function. We're going to look at an introduction to array, basic array operations, introduction to object, dot and bracket notation and object notation. I hope the time that we have will be able to allow us to finish all of this. All right. So you are welcome, Mr. Kenne. All right. So let's move on. So let's start with the return statement. Return statement. Return statement in function. So there are two types of return in function in JavaScript function. We have implicit. Okay, let's start with the explicit. Explicit and implicit what? Implicit return. Implicit return. Yeah. So let's use an example. So when we talk about implicit and explicit return, already you know and are familiar with the meaning of return. That return is used to send back a value from the function to the caller and terminates the function. That was what we looked at in our last class. All right, so let me go over to my notes and please hold on. Yeah, so I did said that return statement in JavaScript function is used to send a value back to the caller. So it means that when a function reaches a return statement, when a function reaches a return statement, it stops execution and returns the specified value. So we looked at that. So now, what about what? So what's the meaning of explicit return and implicit return? So explicit return and implicit return. So for explicit return, this is what it means here. Explicit return simply means that so it means that when you use the return keyword, let's use that word. So an explicit return means the function explicitly uses the return keyword to return a value. All right. So that's the meaning of explicit return. Explicit return. So it's it means the function explicitly using the return keyword to return a value. So when I'm talking about explicit, I'm talking about manually. You are doing it yourself manually. You get that now? So manually. So all right, and explicit return works for both regular functions and um, arrow function. Works for both regular function and arrow function. So when we talk about regular function, we are talking about function declaration and what do you call it, arrow function. Sorry, function declaration and function expression. So a regular function in JavaScript is a function declared using the function keyword. All right, so you get now. So when we are talking about regular function in JavaScript is a function declared using the function keyword. It can be named or anonymous, and it and is different from arrow function. It is different from arrow function. All right, it is different from arrow function. So when we are talking about regular function, we are talking about function declaration and what, and function expression. The reason why they are regular function, it is because they use the function keyword. And if you remember yesterday in our class where we talked about the three basic JavaScript function that we have: function declaration, function expression, and arrow function. But if you notice, for function declaration and function expression, they used the function keyword. They use the function keyword. So a regular function in JavaScript is a function that is declared using the function keyword. So that makes function declaration a regular function, function expression a regular function. So when you hear the word regular function, just know that it's referring to a named function, which is function declaration, and an anonymous function, which is referring to function expression. All right. So explicit return now. Let's go back to explicit return. So explicit return now works on works on regular function and what, arrow function. Works on regular function and arrow function. So please take note of that. Please take note of that. All right. So whenever you want to explicitly return a value from a function, you have to use the return keyword. You have to use the return keyword. So let's say, for example, we have this function here called add, and I have a parameter a, b, and this. So I say, okay, return a plus b. So and I call the function like this with 5 and 13. So now what we have here, okay, let me just console log it or put it, let me just say const, or let's call it result, because this, then we can console it. So I'll call it result. All right, good. Call it result. So you see now what we have here is what we call implicit return. Sorry, explicit return. What we have here is called explicit return. Explicit return. So that means you use the return keyword. You use the return keyword. Okay. Now, like I said the explicit return works on all function. So if you look at this is, we are using the return keyword. That makes it what, an explicit return. We use the return keyword. All right. So we can do the same thing too for function expression and arrow function. So let's say, for example, I convert this to arrow function too as well. I can come here and do const, and I'll say add, and it will still work. See that it will work. So if I inspect, come to console, can you see 18? And I can as well convert it to an arrow function just by removing this function keyword and substituting it with what this arrow here, and it will still what work. You see that now 18. So now you see that the explicit return, whereby you use the return keyword, works on all function. All right, it works on all function. So the implicit return, please pay attention now. The implicit return only works for arrow function, but does not work for other functions like the regular function that we have. You get that now? So implicit return, implicit return only works for arrow function, but does not work for regular functions like function expression and arrow function. So now implicit return means the function does not use the return keyword. So it does not use the return keyword, but JavaScript automatically returns the result of a single expression. So what happened is this: for implicit return, it doesn't use the return keyword as explicit return. So implicit return doesn't use the return keyword. So there's no need for you to use the return keyword for implicit return. So JavaScript is intelligent enough to automatically return the result of that expression. You get that now? So it doesn't use um, return keyword, and it can only be used for arrow function. So implicit return is used for arrow function, and the essence of implicit return is to help us to write concise code. All right, is to help us to write what concise code, is to help us to write concise code. So please take note of that. It helps us to write concise code. It helps us to write concise code. When I mean concise code, short code. So we use implicit return for short and simple function, just a one-liner function, a one-liner function. Now take for example, when you see, look at this function. Now this is an arrow function. This is an arrow function. Notice what we are returning from this function, just a plus b. It's a one line or one liner function, meaning it just have one line of code, one line, just one line, a plus b. It's not that we have multiple lines of code there, or like we have multiple statements in the function body. Since we don't have multiple statements in the function body, nor do we have a complex logic that we want to execute in the function, it's just one line of code, then we can use what implicit return, but that function has to be arrow function. So if you look at this now, since what we are returning from this function is just a plus b, a plus b, one liner, one line of code, what we are going to do now is to use what implicit return on this arrow function. How do we do it? One, whenever you want to use implicit return on arrow function, number one, you must ensure that the implicit return that you want to use on that arrow function is returning one line of code. One line of code. If it is beyond one line of code, that means you cannot use what return. You cannot use implicit return. It has to be what one line of code. That is why implicit return is used to return. Is used for concise code. It helps us to it is used to return short and simple functions. All right, so now in this case it's just one line of code we want to return. So now that we've established that implicit return can only be used on arrow function, and two, it must be a one liner function, meaning you just want to return one line of code, then number three is that it must not come with what a function body. You know, this curly brace now is called a function body. So if you want to use explicit return here now, sorry, implicit return, let me do it. Implicit return here. It's very simple. I'll just come here. Let me uh, copy this and comment this part. I'll bring this part here. So yeah, I'll paste it here. The other one. So now, number one, it has to be what one line of code. And one, if it is one line of code, then you don't need the function block. this function block here. So let's remove the function block. You remove it. You remove. So you bring this closer here. So now you will now remove what, the return keyword. So if you save, can you see this is what, implicit return. So you can see how it helps us to write concise code. That means short code. It helps us to write concise code. It helps us to write concise code. All right, now it helps us to write what, concise code. All right. So that is, now I hope you get it now. You understand it. The difference between explicit and implicit. Explicit is when we use the return keyword manually, like we use the return keyword. And explicit can be used when you want to execute complex logic, or you want when you have multiple logic of statements that you want to execute in a function. Then you will use what, explicit return. But if it's just one line of code that you want to return from a function, I would rather you use what, arrow function, so that it can help you write what, concise and a cleaner what, code. So that is the difference between implicit and explicit. So now let me show you something here. Let's say, for example, we want to check if a number is positive or negative. We want to check if a number is positive or negative. So we are going to create a function called check number, and we are going to call the function with any random number. So it's going to check if that number is positive or negative. So let's check it now. So I'll say const check number. So let's make it an arrow function. So I'll give it num. Yeah. So and I will call check number. Okay, let me console log it. Let me call it inside of the console. Alright, so I'll call it with 5. So here, now how do we check the number now? So I'll say if the num, that's the parameter representing the value, that's the argument. If the num is greater than is 0, so if the num is greater than is 0, then we'll return what we call return positive. Return positive. Then we'll now say else if, I've taught you that already, if the norm is less than is 0. You see that if the norm is less than is 0, we want to return, what's that, we want to return negative. But if the number is 0, if the number is 0, we'll just come here, instead of having else there, we'll just do return 0. Now you see. So now in this kind of case now, you cannot use implicit return here, even though this is an arrow function. Now you can see that inside of the function body, that means the function block, it comes with what, it comes with multiple statement, or it comes with like complex um complex logic or multiple statement, you get. So, and it has multiple lines. So you can see it has multiple lines of code, unlike the first one that we looked at. So it has multiple lines of code. So if in the function body a code or a logic has multiple lines of code, then you don't use implicit return, you use what, explicit return. So here it says explicit return is used when you need multiple lines of code, or when you need the function body. So you get that, when you need the function body. So, and look at what we have here. We are having if else statement, a full statement. You see that now inside of a function. So you cannot use what they call it, implicit return. So you have to use explicit, whereby you have to specify the return keyword. So in this case now we have a function called check number, and it's an arrow function, and we call the check number function with what, a value of what, 5. They will now say, okay, this num here, which is the parameter serving as a placeholder for this value. We are using it to check, okay, if the norm is greater than a zero, then we want to return what? Positive. But if the norm is less than a zero, we want to return what? Negative. But if the number is not greater than a zero, and if it's not less than a zero, that means if it is a zero, then we want to return what? Is zero. You see that now? So this is like the else now. All right, this is like the else. So you see that now. So very fine, and we can even use switch statement to be able to achieve this too as well. All right. So and if you save, and let's come here, where is it? You see that it is, we're having positive here. Okay, yeah, positive. So if I do minus 5 for instance now, we are going to get what? Negative. You see that now we are getting negative. And if I do something like a 0, if I do a 0, we are getting what? Is 0. You see that now? Okay, so let me show you from the 5. Now it checks, okay, the norm which is representing 5, is 5 greater than 0? Now watch. If 5 greater than 0, yes, 5 is greater than 0. So what will be returned from this function is what? Positive. So the moment it returns positive, every other code in this function will not be executed. That is the power of return. Every other code in this function will not be what? Executed. That's the essence of return. But if the number, let's say it's a negative number, and also okay, is minus 5 greater than a 0? Since minus 5 is not greater than a 0, then that means the condition is false. That means the code inside of the if block will not be executed. Then it will come to the else if. They will now check, okay, is minus 5 less than a 0? Apparently, minus 5 is less than a 0. Then it will return this negative. It will return this negative value here, this string negative. So once it returns, it will terminate the function. It will stop running the function. So that means it will not even get to this point where we have return 0. But if the value now is 0, it's going to check, is 0 greater than a 0? That is false. So this will not be executed. Then it check, is 0 less than a 0? False. That means this one will not be executed. Then it will come here and return 0. You get that now? So that is how it works. And we'll get what is 0 here. So that's how implicit and explicit return works. So implicit return is used when you know you need the curly bracket or the function body or the function block, and when you want to return when you need when you want to return multiple lines of code, or you want to have multiple statements. All right, you get that now. But implicit return is great for concise single expression function. So implicit return does not work with block. That's function block. I already said that. It does not work with what? Function block. It does not work with function block. So now if I put, now what? If I put a block here. Now if I put a block here and I save. See, if I put a block here and I save, it will not work. Now watch. Nothing is showing. Can you see? Undefined. It's giving us undefined. It's not working. Why? Because implicit return does not work with what? Block. But if we still want it to work like this, if we want it to work, what we are going to do is this. If we want this to work, what we are going to do is to put this object here, like this block, we have to wrap it inside of a parenthesis. So I'm going to wrap it inside of a parenthesis like this. I'll wrap it inside of a parenthesis, and let's see. Okay, I guess it's supposed to work. It's supposed to work. Why is it not working? um yeah, it's supposed to work like this. Or okay, it won't work like this. Actually, it won't work like this. It won't work like this. So let's see if it won't work like this. But let's take it back. It won't work like this. There's a way it is going to work. That's if we are returning an object. Yes, here in this case now we are not returning an object, and I haven't taught you object yet, so let's leave it. So it is when we are returning an object, then we can now put the object inside of a parenthesis. But apparently this is not an object; it's actually a function block. So let's leave it the way it is. Sorry about that. So let's bring it back. All right. So Now I think we've done justice to this. Now let's zoom on array. What is array? I hope you understand it up to this point before I proceed, guys.
Yeah, we do understand.
All right, good.
Yes, we do understand.
All right, good, good. So let me comment this console and also comment this console. So now let's talk about array. So I'll do introduction to array, introduction to array. So let's go back to our. Now we have fully entered into the non-primitive data type. The non-primitive data type. So we started yesterday with function. Now we are moving to array, and if time permits us, we will also look at object too as well. All right. So what is array? So array represent ordered collections of value. Array represent ordered collections of value. So arrays are also like big containers that contains variables and then reference them. So an array can hold as many values as we want and as many types as well. So array can hold as many values of any data types. That's what it means, of any data type. So let's say for example, take for example, you want to have, let me show you the limitation of using primitive value and primitive data type compared to non-primitive data type. So let's say for example you have 5 friends and you want to save the 5 friends in a variable. What you are going to do is you have to create 5 variables. So let's say const. You can give it name one, so that name one, and call it Esther. Then const name two, also the name two, you call it Alice. Then const name three, you call it Nati. So we call, we say name three, okay, name four now. We call it we call it Joseph. Then name five, we call it Kingsford. Is it Kingsford? Okay, Kingsford. So now look at, we have 5 names of your friends. Now look at the limitation of primitive values or primitive data type. But with array, you don't have to have it like this. With array, you can have all these values: Esther, Alice, Nitiyosi, okay, Niyosi, and Joseph, and Kingsford. We can have all of these values in one array. In one array. So, in order for us to have something like this is where array comes in. So, what I'm going to do is this. I'll say const. So let's say for example I want to store a list. I want to store the the friends that I have here, the list of friends inside of a single array. So what I'm going to do, I'll just say const list, or I can give it a variable name that depicts what I want, list of friends, or friends name. See that friends name. Then I'll do a a square bracket. You see that now, a square bracket. So in this square bracket, I'm going to pass the Esther, comma, Alice, um, Niyoso, okay, Niyiso, and Joseph, and Kingsford. which one is better? This one is better compared to this one. All right. This one is better compared to this one. So you get now. So let's move on. I'm just going to comment this part just to show you the limitation of primitive data type. So we have Esther, Alice, Yiso, Joseph, and Kingsford. So now we have it in an array. So this is an array. An array consists of what? A square bracket. Then in the square bracket, you can now put any values of any data type and assign it to a variable called friend's name. So the variable has to describe the kind of value that is stored inside of the array. So now that is array. So let's go further. So all we can okay we can call it friends instead of friend's name. Let's just call it friends. Yeah, good. I think friends is better. So friend. So you can even have years stored like this. Blah blah blah. So yeah, in JavaScript, values can be categorized into two main types: primitive values and non-primitive values, also known as reference values. So non-primitive values can also be known as what? Reference value. So here's the difference between primitive values and reference value or non-primitive value. So primitive values are immutable, unchangeable, meaning their values cannot be changed once they are created. There are six primitive data types in JavaScript: string, number, big int, boolean, undefined, and null. And here it says when you manipulate a primitive value, you are working directly with its actual value. Primitive values are compared by their actual value. Primitive values are stored in memory as a single value. Take for example, let's we assign 10 to this variable called x. So if we now say let x be equals to y, so let y be equals to x, like we are assigning x to y now holds a copy of the value of what? X. You see that now? So, and if I change the value of x from 10 to 20, and if you console the log y, the output will be 10. The value of y remains unchanged. You see that now? It remains what? Unchanged. So now non-primitive values, which is also called reference value. Non-primitive values are mutable, meaning their properties or elements can be changed. Non-primitive values include object, array, function, and other instances of object. When you manipulate a non-primitive value, you are working with a reference to the value's location in memory. So non-primitive values are compared by reference, meaning two variables containing references to the same object are considered equal, even if they are not the same physical object. So non-primitive values are stored in memory as a reference to their location. So let's take for example, we have an object. Okay, all of these probably when we finish, when we touch object, we can look at this in details because we've not really touched object and I don't want to go ahead of myself. So let's just okay, it's like the note has moved us to object. All right. So let's go back to uh what's it called? Let's go back to array. So now that we know that array can be used to store multiple values of any data type. Apparently what we have here, all the values that we have here, they are just string data type. You can store number, store any data types, whether from primitive or non-primitive. All right, now the question now is, please hold on. Okay, so now where did I stop? I've lost my train of thoughts. Um, This call just distracted me. All right, so now that we know that array can be used to receive multiple values of different data types, it doesn't have to be the same data type. Now, how can we access these values? So, array is not just used to store values of any data type, it can also be used to retrieve the value that you store. So, how do we retrieve or access the value that we store in the array? But before we do that, you must understand that I said that array is an ordered collection of value, ordered. So when we are talking about order, we are talking about um when we say order, that means that we cannot just access the value of any of we cannot just access the value of an array without first of all knowing the position of that array, of that value in the array. So that is what it talks that is what it means when we say it is an ordered collection of what values. So for you to be able to retrieve that value, you must know the position, or you can call it index. You must know the position of the value in the array. So now the position or the index of an array value starts from what is zero. Please take note. The index or the position of the value of an array starts from a zero. So normally you might want to say the position of Esther is one. No. The position, which can also be called or known as index, the index or position of Esther, the value of Esther in this array is not one, is what is zero. So the index of Esther is 0, the index of Alice is 1, the index of Niyosi is 2, the index of Joseph is 3, and the index of Kingsford is what? 4. So we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Though there are 5 values there, but their position as touching array is from 0 to what? 4. All right, now. So that is what it means when we say array is an ordered collection of values. Now let's move on. So the values that we store inside of an array can also be called elements of an array or members of what? An array. All right, so now let's now see how we can retrieve the values of an array now that we have an understanding of position or index of what? An array. So come here, I'll just do accessing, or let me use retrieving the values of an array. Retrieving the values of an array. So let's see. So here, to retrieve the value of an array, let's just do console.log. Then to retrieve the value of an array, know that the array is assigned to a variable called what? Friends. So you have to just get the variable friends. Then afterwards, to access any value of an array, you need what? The curly bracket. Sorry, the square bracket, not curly. The square bracket. Then after the square bracket, inside of the square bracket, you now begin to in the square bracket. That's where the position of the value that you want to retrieve will be placed. So let's say I want to start from 0. So I'm going to duplicate this. So this will be 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if I save now, it's going to get me Esther, Alice, Niyiso, Joseph, and Kingsford. So let's see. Can you see? Fantastic. All right. Fantastic. So that is how what do you call it now? Array works. You see that now? Very good. But that's not all we can do with array. So array is not just limited to storing values and retrieving the values of the array based on their position, but there are much more things that we can do in array. All right. So now, first of all, let's start with length. So let's look at methods. Okay, let's start with length first. Length. So let's see other actions, or yes, other actions that we can perform in array. Other actions that we can perform in array aside from storing and retrieving the values of an array. Number one is what? Length. So when we talk about length, length talks about the number of values that we have in an array. The number of values, the total number of values that we have in an array. So if you are to calculate this now, the total number of values in this array is 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now please, the total number of values in an array is different from the position of the values in an array. Please take note of that. It's very, very key. The difference has to be clear. All right. So now when we talk about length, length talks about the total number of values that we have in an array. So the total number of values that we have in this friends array is what? 5. All right. So how do we get the total length, or the total number of values in an array, which is length? Is just to do console.log, and I'll call it friends now dot. The moment I press dot, it will bring out all the methods that are associated with what? Array, but we are interested in length. So I'll just say length like this, and you save. So now let's see the result now. Can we see 5? The length of the array is what? 5. All right. So now let's use the knowledge of the length to now get the last index of the array. Sorry, the last value of the array without using its index. Let's get it programmatically. So I'll just say last, get last element of an array. So to get the last element of an array programmatically or dynamically, yes, dynamically, without using what do you call it? Without using the position or the index value of that last element, because apparently the last element is Kingsford, and the position of Kingsford in the array is 4. Is 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the position of Kingsford is what? 4. All right. But we don't just want to just say friends at position 4. We want to dynamically get the last element of the array. And how do we do it? With the knowledge of length. Now, if the length is 5, if the length is 5 and the index of the last element is 4, so what does it tell us? It tells us that the last element of an array is one less than the length of an array. So let's do it. The last element of an array is one one less, that's -1, is one less than the length of the array. All right, length of the array. So the formula will be eg. The formula will be array dot length minus what? 1. That's the formula. So that's the formula. So now let's see how we can use it now. So I'll come here, I'll say console.log, and I'll say friends now. That's the variable that is holding the array. Then in position. So now instead of passing 4 here now, I will now do friends dot length minus what? 1. This will give me the last element of the array. Now check. Can you see Kingsford? All right, Kingsford. Fantastic. So that's that. So now let's look at other methods. Like now, there are still a lot of things that we can do with array. There are a lot of actions that we can perform on array. All right. So what are other functions that we can perform on array? So when we talk about, now we are in array methods now. See that array method, basic array operations. That's the method. Now we're in array methods now. So now for array method, what is a method? All All right. What is a method? What is a method? What is a method? Now, when we say method, method in JavaScript is a function. Method in JavaScript is a function that is a property of an object. It is used to define behaviors or actions that an object can perform. You get that now? An object can what perform. So it defines the behavior or action that the object can perform. So when we say array method, so array method is a function that performs a particular action, that performs a particular action. You get that now? So now we are going to look at several actions that we are going to be performing on this array. Several actions that are going to be performing on the array. So number one now, okay, we've looked at length. Number one is it possible to add elements to an array aside from um, the initial values that we have in that element, in that array? Is it possible we can add elements to an existing array? Yes, it is possible. Now when it now comes to adding elements, now the next thing now will be, where can we add element? Can we add an element and make can we add an element in the beginning of an array, or can we add it as the last element of the array, or can we add it in any position of an array? Yes, we can do that. There's a method for that. And number two, can we remove element? Yes, we can remove element. So we can remove the first element, we can remove the last element, and we can even remove we can remove element in any position of the array. So you see that now. So there are methods that we can use to be able to perform all of this, and many more which we are going to look at. So we are not going to explore all the methods of array now. We are just going to look at the beginner level of the methods. So once we touch DOM for like a week or 2 weeks, then we'll come back to advanced array, advanced strings, and different methods that we are going to be looking at. Then we'll now go back to DOM again, with then we can finalize the JavaScript class. All right. And the way I'm looking at this JavaScript simplified course, the way I'm looking at this program is going to exceed 8 weeks. It might be 10 weeks. All right. So let's move on, because I really need to load you guys with enough knowledge, so that by the time you'll be making a decision, or you want to make a decision to now venture into main stack, like you want to venture into React and Node.js and Next.js, you'll be well equipped with what you already have a background or a foundational knowledge of JavaScript, because React, Node.js, Next.js, they are all within the JavaScript stack. So you get that now, and that I'm going to be introducing that course after we are done with JavaScript. So it's going to be main stack plus Next.js. So it's going to be like a 6 month course. That's like 24 weeks. This one is 8 weeks, so that one is going to be 24 weeks. 24 weeks. So it's going to be a robust course. So please anticipate that course. All right. So let's move on. Um, so let's look at other methods now. So let's see how we can add. So to add elements, to add elements to an array, to an array, to add elements to an array. Let's see. So the first one is to use on shift, using on shift. All right. So this on shift is used to add element as the first element of the array. So let's say I want to add more friends to this array of friends that we have here. I want to have more friends. I'll just come here, I'll do friends dot on shift. Guys, if you over on the on shift, it tells us that insert new element at the start of an array and returns the new length of an array. So here, let's say I want to add um ekene. So I'll say I want to add ekene. All right. So now I've added ekene. So now let's see the updated array now. So I'll just console the log. I'll console the log friends now. So let's see the updated array. So can you see ekene now is added as the first element of what of the array. You see that now we've added akene. So now the length, the initial length was 5. Now it has increased to 6. You see that there, 6 in the parentheses. So that's good. So let's look at number 2. So that will be using push. So I'll come here, I'll say friends dot push. So now the push appends new element to the end of an array and returns the length of an array. So now let me add what can we add here now? I think we've added Joseph. Let's add Bob. Yes, let's add Bob. So if we add Bob, and let me duplicate this console log friends and bring it down here. Now you will see something. Now has been added to Bob has been added to the list of friends that we have. Now can you see as the last element? So now the length is no longer 6. Now the length is what? 7. So that is for shift and push. So now let's look at how we can remove elements. We are taking it gradually, just hold on. Remove elements from an array. So number 1 will be using shift. So to use shift is very simple. Just do friends dot on shift like this. That's all. You don't need to pass anything in there. You don't need to pass anything in there. So it says, okay, no, not on shift. This is supposed to be shift. Shift, yeah. So can you see? It removes the first element from an array and returns it. If the array is empty, undefined is returned and the array is not modified. So now you can see this how to remove the first element of an array. So I'm just going to bring this down here and save. So let's see. When I do shift, can you see Ekene has been removed? Now we are back to what Esther as the first element of the array. Alright, so then number 2, we use what we call pop. Using pop. So pop removes the last element of an array. So I'll just say friends dot what pop. So you can call pop, you can call the on shift as many times as you want. You can say friends dot shift plenty times and even friend dot pop plenty times. All right. So let me duplicate this. So if you save, now we'll be back to the original array. Guys, we are now back to the original array. All right. So good. Now the next thing I want us to look at, aside from using on shift, push, shift, and pop, I want us to look at splice. We're going to look at 2 more, apparently. Let's say 2 or 3 more. I don't want us to go deep into the array method. There's a class for that, advanced array method and string method. So okay, let's look at splice. Well, first of all, let's look at let's look at slice. So to extract or extracting elements from an array. So we use what we call using slice. Using slice. All right, using slice. So extracting elements from an array, you can use slice. Now, what is slice? Slice is used to extract elements from an array and return that element to you as what? An array. So it returns an extracted element of an array as an array. So again, so let's take for example, we want to extract like the first three friends that we have here. That's Esther, Alice, and Niyiso. So we want to extract three friends that we have here. And how do we do that? We use slice. So first of all, we'll do friends dot what? Slice. So now this slice will have to receive a start index and end index, or it has to receive a start number and a end number. All right. So, and I'm going to dwell on this slice for probably the next 10 minutes or 15 minutes. Now, because when you want to slice out or extract some elements from an array, first of all, you have to provide where do you want to start from? That is the start. And where do you want to end? So now this slice can receive a negative or positive what number as your start or end value. All right. So let's look at it. So if I say I'm starting at position 0, so first of all, let us let us start with a start number. So if you have a start number and you do not provide the end number, so what JavaScript will see it as is that okay, you are starting from the first element. So since you did not provide the end index or the end number, JavaScript is going to extract the element from the specified index that you provide till to the end of what of the elements of the array. So if you console or log this now, for instance, if you console or log this, you console or log this, let's look at what we have here. See, we are getting back what? Esther, Alice, Niyiso, Joseph, and Kingsford from line 67. Can you see line 67? So that means that if you don't have a end value, so JavaScript is going to get the extracted element from the value that you provided as your start value, then to the end of what of the array. So even though you provide like 2 now, for instance, you provide 2, so it's going to start from, so 2 will be 0 1 2. It's going to start from Niiso and get it to the end. So now look at, it's going to get it to the end. All right, so now let's see how we can now use a start count and the end. So I'll do 0 comma and what 3. So let's see what we are going to get here. So it's going to start from this part. So this is 0 1 2 3. So the peculiar or the unique case about slice is that when you provide the end value, you are expecting that you want to extract the value from the start to the end. So just like where we have 0 and 3. So we are starting from Esther. Normally we are supposed to end at Joseph. So we are supposed to get Alice, Esther, Alice, Niyiso, and Joseph. But that's not how it works. So what this is it here? Once we add a end value, it's not going to get us the end value. It's going to get us the value before the end value. So instead of getting Joseph, it's going to get us Esther, Alice, and Niyiso. So you get that now. So let's save and let's see what we are going to get here. So you can see there's no Joseph there. So it's giving us three values. So this is the way I understand it. So just like saying 0 and 3. So since this is the end count, you can just say 3 minus 0 is 3. So it's like you are getting three elements from what? You are getting three elements from the array starting from what? Is 0. That's the best way I understand it actually. So let's look at another one here, whereby we can pass what? A negative value. So now, from what I showed you, where initially we pass what is 0 here, where we pass is 0 here before I change it to 2, that it gives us all the elements of the array. So that means slice can be used to do what we call shallow copy. So let's say, for example, if you want to have a duplicate of an array, or yes, a duplicate of an array, you want to replicate an array, you can use slice. So slice will actually help you to do what we call shallow copy. To do what we call shallow copy. So it will copy the array for you, a shallow copy. So you can use slice to do that. So now let's see how we can pass what a negative value here. So let's start with what? -1. You know, for positive value, it starts from the left side. It starts extracting from the left side. But for negative value, it will start extracting from the right side. All right, it will start from the last element and start extracting. So let's see -1 and let's see what we are going to get. So when we say -1, we are getting the last element returned in an array. You get, we are getting it returned in an array. All right, so now let me, I can also do -2 here too as well, and it's going to give me the last two elements, Joseph and Kingsford. So like that. So let me duplicate. So let's see if I want to have two negative values. I do -3 and -1. So of course, -3 is lower than -1. I hope you are aware. So -3 is lower than -1. So what is going to happen is this. So now let me show you what it means here. So since negative number starts from the last element, so Kingsford is -1, Joseph is -2, Niiso is -3, Alice is -4, and Esther is -5. You get that now? So if I am starting from -3 as the lowest, because -3 is lower than -1. So if I'm starting from -3, so it's going to start from Niiso, and -1 will be what? Kingsford. So apparently it's not going to give me Kingsford. It's just going to give me Niiso and what? Joseph. You get that now? Iniso and Joseph. Still the same method I told you. So if you say -3 minus 1, that makes it -3 plus 1. And it's going to give you what? -2. So that's going to give you two elements. Alright? Two elements. So if you save that now, it's going to give you Niso and Joseph, if I'm not mistaken. So you say that Niso and Joseph. So that's how slice work. And the beautiful thing about slice is that slice slice can be used slice can be used for shallow copy, meaning meaning to get a duplicate of an array, and two, slice does not does not does not mutate or change the original array. Slice does not mutate or change the original array. You get that? So slice does not mutate or change the original array. So when you use slice on an array, it does not change the form, the shape of the array. Alright? So good. So now how many methods have we looked at now? One, two, three, four, five, and six. So let's stop at splice. Then we'll look at other aspects. So if we want to add, remove, and replace elements in an array, the best method to use is what? Splice. Now there's a difference between slice and splice. Oh. All right, so splice. Now, ooh, we are getting there. So let's say, mm, should I still use different array now, or let me just use a different array? Let me use a different array. Let me call it const fruits. And let's say we have apple, cashew. Um, mm, who can give me apple name? Apple. Who can give me fruit name here? Please, I need idea. I'm lost of. Okay, pineapple. One more.
Oranges.
Okay, oranges. Thank you. All right, so let's stop here. Oranges. So we have pineapple, cashew, apple, and what oranges. So now we want to do one thing. We want to use splice to remove. We want to use using splice method. Splice method to remove elements. So we want to use splice method to remove what elements. Now watch. Now first of all, splice is different from slice. Splice mutates or changes the original array. It changes the form entirely. So when you use splice, please pay attention. When you use splice on an array, you can never get the original form of that array again. Yes, you can never get the form of the original array again when you use splice on an array. Unlike slice, whereby even though you use slice on an array, you will still be able to get the original array. But it's different for splice. So splice, when you use it on an array, it does not it changes the original array. So it mutates or changes what the original array. So now with this splice, we solve the problem of adding value in anywhere in the array, unlike on shift and push that we use to add value at the beginning and the end. But with splice, we can add values anywhere in any position of the array. Then with splice, we can remove element in any position of the array. Then with splice, we can remove and also replace an element in any array. So three things. So let's first of all use splice to remove elements. So first we'll just do fruits. We'll do fruits dot splice. So now this splice, the first value is going to receive as an argument will be the index where you want to start removing from. Yes. So it will start with what? A an index. So where do you want to start from? Yes, if you hover on this now, I say start number. Can I say start? So where do you want to start from? Then followed by delete count. How many elements you want to delete from where you want to start from, or from where you started from. So now let's say for example, I'm starting from, let's say I want to start from one, index one. Now I'll say okay, I'm starting from index one, comma. Then I'll now specify how many elements do I want to remove from index one. So if I say I want to remove one element, so it means that now listen, it means that I'm starting from index one, which is what cashew. So I want to remove one element from index one. That means I want to remove cashew. So I'm only removing what cashew. So if I console the log now, if I console the log fruits, you will notice that the original array has been altered. Now watch. Can you see? You can't see cashew anymore. Cashew has been removed. You see that? And I can say, okay, I want to start from index one and remove two elements. I'll just say two and I save. Once I save that, look at cashew and pineapple will be removed. Now we are left with what? Apple and orange. All right, good. So if I don't comment this fruit dot splice, if I don't comment it, my original array will not be restored. So let me comment it so that I can still work with it with the original array. So now let's see how we can use um, using splice now to add elements. So using splice to add elements, so I'll come here, I'll say fruits dot splice. So here in this case, let's say I want to start at position 0 or position 2. Anywhere you can play around with it after this class. So let's say I want to start at position 2. So apparently position 2 is pineapple. So that means I'm starting at position 2. So that means if pineapple is in position 2, it will no longer be in position 2 anymore because I'm starting in position 2, then comma, then the following value will be how many elements do I want to remove. So since I don't want to remove any element at all, I just want to what add element. So I will provide 0 as the value. So a 0 simply means you are not removing any value. Then comma, I will now provide the elements I want to add. So I'll just do it. I want to add mango and banana. So that means at position 2, mango and banana will be added. Now watch. Can you see at position 2 we have mango followed by banana before we now have pineapple and orange. You see that now? Fantastic. So now let me comment this so that I can still have the original array. So here using splice to replace element now. Let's say I can use splice to replace elements. So I come here, I'll do fruits. I'll do fruits dot splice. So let's say I want to start at position 0, 1, 2, 3. I want to start at orange. So I'll come here, I'll do position 3. I want to remove or let me start at position 0. So I want to remove apple and cashew. So I'll start at position 0. So from position 0, I want to remove two elements. Then I also want to replace that two elements with another one. Let's say I want to replace it with strawberry and um, please give me fruit name. Give me fruit name. Give me fruit name. Strawberry and what?
Plums.
Eh?
I was saying plums.
Plums. I don't know about that fruit. Maybe you should spell it.
It's PLUMS.
Plums. Okay, plum. Okay, plums.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I don't know what plums is. So maybe probably I might check it after the class. All right. So now we're adding strawberry plums in the place of what apple and what cashew. So if you save that now look at what we have: strawberry and plums. Now you can't find apple and cashew anymore. So that's all about splice. That's all about splice. So how many methods we've looked at? Length 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So we looked at 7 methods today. So let's just stop here for the methods of array. Later on in the future, we'll look at advanced method of array. All right. So the next thing that I want us to look at will be let's look at object now. Let's look at object. We have like less than 40 minutes or less than 45 minutes. So let's see what we can do with objects. All right, object literal. object literal. So let me go here and console, or let me just for all the array now, let me do a multi-line comment and come here and do this. Yes. Yep. So before I go into introduction to object, I hope you understand. You understood the array method I explained to you. You don't have any issue understanding those methods, right?
Yes, yes, please.
Okay, all right. So now let's look at introduction to object. So once we are done with objects, hopefully within the time that we have, then by Saturday we are going to look at loop. We'll look at everything, not everything. We are going to look at major loop, major loops. Then by next week we'll look at introduction to document object model, but we can begin to work with the browser's interface instead of console.log. I'm sure by now you'll have been tired of console.log. All right, so let's move on. Introduction to object. Introduction to object. So let's look at object literal. Now, when we talk about object, there are, aside from object literal, there are three ways we can create object programmatically. Three ways we can create object programmatically. Number one is using a constructor function. Number two is using ES6 classes. And number three is using object.create. These are the three methods that we can use, or three ways that we can use to create an object programmatically. Please, programmatically. But there's another way we can have objects, or we can create an object by ourselves manually, which is using what object literal. So when we say object literal in JavaScript is a way to define objects using a concise and simple syntax. It allows you to create an object with properties and methods in a straightforward manner. In a straightforward manner. So let's look at syntax of an object literal. An object literal is defined using curly brace. All right. So just like the way we have array, we can have object literal too. So I can say something like, let's say I want to have an information about a person. An information about a person. So I can say something like const person then this assignment operator. Then we have a curly bracket. You see that now. So an object literal is defined using what? A curly brace. Is defined using a curly brace. So now this is the curly brace. Then after that, inside of the curly brace, we defined a key value pair. A key value pair. So the key or the properties are strings, or they can be called identifiers, while the values can be of any data type, including numbers, strings, arrays, function, or even other object. That means we can have object nested inside of another object. So now let's look at the key value pair we're talking about. So the key there represents property. So now let's say in this person information, I want to have his first name, his last name, his age, and his other informations about the person. So I'll come here, I'll say first name. So first name, so this is the key. Then I'll do John. Then here I'll say last name. I will have Doe. Then I will have age to be 30. Then we'll have is employed, then we'll say true. All right, then we'll save. Now this is a simple, straightforward object using what we call object literal. So the object literal is defined using a curly brace, and inside of the curly brace we have this key and value pair. So this first name is called key or can be called property. So it follows the same naming convention for variable. You know, this is a camel case. I think it's safer when you use camel case. Just use camel casing. Get that now. So first name John, last name Doe, age 30, is employed, then true. You see that? So the first name, the last name, the age is employed. They are all keys or properties of the person object. Why John, Doe, 30, and true are the corresponding values of these properties. All right. So that is how it works. And please, whenever you are done writing the property and the value, always end it with what? A comma. Because if you don't end it with a comma, there will be what? Error. You will encounter error. All right. So let's move on. Now, this is just a basic example of um of object literal. All right, this is just a basic example. There are a lot of things that we're going to learn, but there's still some advanced aspect to this. But let's just let's take it gradually. All right, so let's take it gradually. Now, let's look at how we can assess the property of an object. How we can assess the property of an object. Assessing the properties of an object. You know, unlike array which is an ordered collection of values, but in object is not ordered. Object is not ordered. Object is just a key value pair, key value pair data type in JavaScript. All right. So now to assess the properties of an object is very simple. So in JavaScript, we can access object property using two methods. Number one, using the dot notation or the bracket notation. So we can use the dot notation or the bracket notation. So both methods allows us to be able to retrieve and to add or to modify properties in an object. To modify properties in an object. So let's take for example the dot notation. The dot notation is the most commonly used and preferred way to access object properties when the property name is a valid identifier. All right. So now let me repeat that. Dot notation is the most commonly used and preferred way to access object properties when the property name is a valid identifier. Now, if you notice so far from I think starting from today's class, if you notice, we've been using dot, dot slice, dot splice, dot length, dot shift, dot unshift, dot push, dot pop, dot. So you can see dot notation. So it's commonly used everywhere. It's commonly used. So all right. So it is commonly used and mostly preferred, or the preferred way to access object property when the property name is a valid identifier. So that means if it doesn't contain space or special character, or it starts with a number. So that's why these properties here, they are called identifiers. So it mustn't start with a space, neither should it start with a character or what start with a number. All right, now, so that's why I say it is safer when you use what camel case, just like the way we use it in array. So let's see how we can access the property of this object using dot notation. So I'll come here, I'll say console.log, and I'll say person dot. The moment I put dot, it listed out all the properties that we have in the array. So I say array in the object. So I'll do person dot. I can say person dot first name, and I can duplicate and also so person the last name like that, and yeah, like that. So if I save now, look at what we have: John and what do, John and do. All right, so let's move on, and let's look at dot note. Let's look at before we look at bracket dot notation. Before we look at bracket notation, though we've looked at dot notation, and let's see when to use dot notation, and let's see the limitation of using what dot notation. So now, when the property name, so when to use dot notation now, please listen. When to use dot notation? When the property name is a valid identifier, meaning letters, numbers, underscore, or a dollar sign. And when to use dot notation? You use dot notation when you know the property name beforehand. You only use dot notation when you know the property name beforehand. So you see that now we have all the properties inside of this person object. So you only use dot notation if the property exists in what? In an object. All right. If it exists in an object. So if it doesn't exist in an object and use a dot notation, it's going to give you what? Undefined. So now let's look at the limitation. The limitation of using undefined. The limitation of using undefined. Now, number one, it says dot notation does not work in these cases. Number one, property name is a string with spaces or special character. So let's say, for example, we have first name. Let's say we do something like this. Instead of first name like this, I'll do first name space and name. Like I put it in a string like this. You see that? I do first name, first space, then name. It's all in a string. And I say, okay, um, person dot first name space name. You will get error straight. If I, it's called syntax error. Can you see? Yeah, even giving it's giving me error. All right, so it will not work. That's one. So property name is so dot notation does not work in the cases where property name is a string, where property name is a string with spaces or special character. So the property name you can see is a string, it doesn't work. Number two, cases where dot notation does not work, when property name starts with a number. So when it starts with a number, so if I do something like um 1 2, and I say person dot 1 2, it will not work. You see that? It will not work. All right, so when property name starts with a number, it will not work. Another cases is when property name is stored in a variable. Is stored in a variable. So let's go back to the first name now. Let me look for another one. Let's say first name. Then yeah. So when property name is stored in a variable. So let's say, for example, um I have what we call let key. You can use const anyway. Let key be equals to color. All right, color. Then I come here. I do um I do color. Okay. Let's say I do color to be red. All right. I do color to be red, and I come here. I duplicate and I say person dot key. If I do person dot key, it's going to give me undefined here. Okay, red. Okay, red is supposed to be in a string. Sorry, my bad. It's supposed to be in a string. So if I save this and I do person dot key, let's see, it's going to give me undefined. The reason why it's giving me undefined is because key as a property is not inside of what the person's object. It's not inside of the person object. So that's the limitation of what of that's the limitation of dot notation. So let me even write that down here. Limitation of dot notation so that you'll be able to let me put that here. Limitation of dot notation. So one property name is a string with spaces or special characters. Then two, when property name is stored in a variable. Then three, when property name starts with a number. All right, so these are the limitation. So now let's look at dot notation. Let's look at okay, sorry, bracket notation now. Bracket notation. So bracket notation is like this. This is how it works. Why dot notation is like this. Alright, good. So let's move on. So here it says that bracket notation is more flexible because it allows property names to be string, it allows property names to be variables, and it allows property name to be expression. All right. So let me um, use another property. Let me just say const person one. Okay, person two now. I can do something like first name because yeah, good. Then I can also do age to be 25 and what again? I can even have color to be red. So now let's see. So bracket notation is more flexible compared to dot notation. It is because it allows property names to be a string, to be strings. Property it allows property name to be variables and it allows property names to be expression. So now let's look at. So yeah, I'll do console.log and I'll say person now. So instead of using dot now, I'll use the square bracket. So in the square bracket, I can pass in. So to access, can you see? Okay, no. It's supposed to be person two. My bad. Then square bracket. So to access the property of person two using bracket notation, you need a square bracket. Then inside of the square bracket, you need a quote, whether it's single quote or double quote. So you see that when I did double quote or single quote, whichever one, is going to bring out all the properties that is inside of the person two object. Can you see age, color, and first name? So if I click on first name and I save, can you see that with bracket notation, it allows my property name to be a string and it won't give me any error. And if you check, I'm getting what Jane. All right. So good. And I can do this duplicate. So this age 25, this is a normal one. So I can just pass what pass age there. At least it's going to give me 25. All right, good. Then the next one will be um, using variables with bracket notation. Using variables with bracket notation. All right, so if you notice here, we have a variable called key, and we assigned this. Um, we assigned what do you call it? We assign this value to this variable. We assign the color value to this variable. Then what we did here is to what I did here is to say color double column then red, color double column then red. So let's see how it works. So here I'm going to do, I'll do console.log and I'll say person 2 at then instead of passing a square a quote. Now you only use quotes for a bracket notation if the property exists in the object. But in this case, we want to reference what? A variable. So since we are referencing a variable or want to use variable with bracket notation, there will not be need for us to put it in a quote. We'll just pass in the what they call it. We'll pass in the variable key. So now this variable key simply means what? You know this variable key, the key I'm coming, the key there is simply means color. So when you pass in key here, so this key, which is a variable, when you're passing key in the bracket notation is referencing what? The value. The value is what? A string color. So it's the same thing as saying person two. It's the same thing as saying person two color like this. So that's what it means. That's what it means here. So we'll say it's same as same person two. So if you come here, if you look at color, is already in person two. So it's going to give us red. So when we say person two, then key. So this key is holding a value called color. And we already have a color in person two object. So it's going to give us the value of the color property in person two. So if you save that now, if you save that, we are going to get what? Red. So you can see with bracket notation, we can use variables. We can use variables with bracket notation. So bracket notation allows you or allows us to use a variable to access a property dynamically. So we want to access this color property. So we use the variable, which is key, to be able to access the color property dynamically. All right. So you can see is very, very simple. Very, very simple. All right. So let's move on. So when should we use bracket notation? When should we use bracket notation? All right. When should we use bracket notation? So when the property name, so when to use bracket notation? When the property name contains spaces or special characters. Number two, when the property name starts with a number. Number three, when the property name is stored in a variable. And number four, when dynamically constructing property name. All right, when dynamically constructing property name. All right, so that is when we can use it. All right, so yeah, so that's it. Very simple. So I think we have one more to go. I guess we have one more to go. To go. That should be okay. Object method. Will I be able to teach object method within? Okay, I should be able to do that. So let's look at it. Let's look at it. Object method. So of course, I already explained the meaning of method. Already explained the meaning of method. So now let's go back to the person here, and let's say we want to. Let's say we want to have a method. Of course, like I said, as a method that function that performs an action. So I'll come here, I'll say greet. So let's say the method I want to call is greet. So of course we can't use a function declaration here. It has to be function expression. So where we attach an anonymous, you can use function expression or arrow function here. So not function declaration. So let's say we are returning. Let's return something here. Okay, let's leave this for now. I'm going to attempt this later. That will be later. So let's say hello, comma, my name is, then so my name is John Doe. So John Doe is a value, John and Doe is a value assigned to these two properties. So how can we access these two properties inside of this function here? So to do that, I'll just say person dot what, first name. Then the next one, I'll also do person dot last name. All right, then a full stop here. So you see, I'm returning this string from this function. So this is an anonymous function assigned as a value to this what, to this property called greet. It is assigned as a value to this property called greet. All right. So if you remember, function expression and arrow function, they are all anonymous function assigned to what, to a variable. So anonymous function is not just limited to us. It's not just, it cannot only be assigned to a variable. We can also assign it to the property of what, of an object, and that's what we have here. So in order for us to be able to call this function greet, so what we are going to do is let me do it here. Object method. So in order for us to call the function greet, I will just do, first of all, the greet function is inside of the person object. So I have to first of all access the object first. So I'll say person, then dot. So we have greet here now. Can you see? I'll just say greet. So I'll call it. Since it's a function, I have to call it. So since I'm returning a value from it, so in order for me to see the value, I have to console.log it. So I'll just say console.log this and save. Can you see? Hello, my name is John Doe. Hello, my name is John Doe. So we've come to the end of today's class. So we've looked at return statement in function, introduction to array, basic array methods, introduction to objects, dot and bracket notation, then object methods. So in our next class, we'll look at loop and all. Then we'll still come back to the this keyword later on, probably after we've touched one or two things in Dome. Then we'll come back to all of this. All right, so we've come to the end of today's class. So before I end the class, do you have any issue? Is there anything in object that I explained that you not really understand? Huh? Is there anything in object that I explained that you not really understand? I need your response, the general and the ISO.
So far, I've understand.
All right,
As
good.
for me,
All right, good. The general, Mr. Joseph. What about you? I guess you're not with us right now. But anyways, the video will be available for you to watch. All right, so we've come to the end of today's class. We'll meet again on Saturday. We'll just have like an hour class on Saturday, hopefully. All right, bye. The video will be available shortly. Bye bye.